Karoline Leavitt panics as Jasmine Crockett exposes his scandal live on TV. The studio lights blazed hot, but the chill in the air came from Karoline Leavitt's eyes. She was confident, rehearsed, and ready for the evening's political debate. Millions were tuned in, waiting to see sparks fly. Across from her sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, calm as ever, her posture relaxed but her gaze sharp. Jasmine had always believed that truth didn't need to be shouted, it only needed to be spoken with courage. The moderator asked a simple question about honesty in leadership. Karoline leaned in, launching into a fiery speech about transparency, morality, and integrity. She painted herself as spotless, untouchable. The crowd clapped politely, though Jasmine just watched in silence. And then, with a steady voice that cut through the noise, Jasmine said, "Karoline, it's brave to preach integrity when you're hiding a scandal that affects the very people you claim to serve." The audience froze. Cameras zoomed in. Karoline's face stiffened, her confidence cracking like thin glass. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. Instead, she reached for a folder, placing it gently on the table. Inside were records, receipts and testimonies from everyday workers who had been silenced, underpaid, and mistreated while Karoline looked the other way. The audience gasped. Karoline's hand trembled, her rehearsed composure slipping into panic. But then came the twist. Jasmine didn't slam the papers down or demand punishment. She paused, looked at Karoline, and spoke with unexpected compassion. "You have a chance, right now, not to double down, not to lie, not to bury the truth. You can choose to make this right. Not for me, not for politics, but for the people who trusted you." The room was silent. Even the moderator leaned back, unsure what would happen next. For a moment, Karoline's eyes darted nervously. Her lips quivered as if she wanted to deny everything. But then something shifted. In the silence of that packed studio, she seemed to see more than her career. She saw the people she had hurt, the workers who had suffered in silence. The audience didn't expect what came next. Karoline lowered her head. "You're right," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I failed them, and I let my ambition blind me." The crowd gasped again, but this time, there was no panic in her voice. There was humanity. Jasmine reached across the table, not as an opponent, but as a fellow human being. "Then start here," she said gently. "Start by making it right." The cameras captured a moment rarely seen on live television. Not anger, not scandal, but redemption. By the end of the night, the debate wasn't about who won or lost. It was about what happens when truth meets compassion. Jasmine's courage to expose wrongdoing wasn't about destroying her opponent. It was about reminding everyone that leadership is measured not by perfection, but by the willingness to change. When the broadcast ended, viewers across America, the UK, and Canada were left with something unexpected: hope. Hope that even in the most divided times, integrity and kindness could still pierce through the noise. Hope that compassion could inspire change in places where politics usually fuels division. And as people shared the clip around the world, one comment summed it up best. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win a debate. She reminded us that the greatest power is not in exposing weakness, but in offering a chance for redemption. One positive closing message. The story reminds us all that truth without kindness can divide, but truth spoken with compassion can heal, and sometimes even transform an enemy into an ally. Continuation of the story. The next morning, headlines exploded. Some read, "Karoline Leavitt admits scandal on live TV." Others said, "Jasmine Crockett's compassion stuns nation." But what people talked about most wasn't the scandal, it was the moment of humanity. Viewers replayed the clip again and again, marveling at how Jasmine could have crushed her opponent, yet instead chose grace. In a cafe in Dallas, a group of college students huddled around a phone, one of them whispering, she could have embarrassed Karoline for good, but she gave her a second chance. That's real leadership. In a small town in Canada, a retired teacher wiped away a tear. That's the kind of example our children need to see. Not shouting, not cruelty, but courage with kindness. Even in London, where politics often mirrors harsh debate, news commentators paused to reflect. One analyst said, "In a world where leaders weaponize mistakes, Crockett reminded us that accountability and compassion can exist side by side." But the story didn't stop there. Behind closed doors, Karoline was shaken. For years she had built walls around her mistakes, convincing herself that denial was easier than truth. Yet Jasmine's words echoed in her mind. Start by making it right. And slowly, she did. She reached out to the workers she had wronged. She offered public apologies, not crafted by a PR team, but handwritten, personal letters. For the first time in years, she stopped speaking like a politician and started listening like a human being. Months later, the two women crossed paths again at a charity event in Washington. The crowd buzzed when they saw Karoline approach Jasmine, unsure if sparks would fly. But instead, Karoline extended her hand. I'm still learning, she said softly. But you gave me the courage to face the truth. Thank you. Jasmine smiled warmly, shaking her hand. That's all any of us can do, learn and keep moving forward. The cameras caught it again. But this time, it wasn't a scandal. It was something far rarer, forgiveness. And people watching around the world realized something profound, that politics doesn't have to be a battlefield. Sometimes it can be a glowing star closing reflection. What began as a clash on live television turned into a reminder that even in the harshest arenas, kindness can disarm anger, truth can spark redemption, and compassion can inspire change. And in that moment, millions were reminded of a timeless truth. When we choose grace over revenge, we don't just change one life, we change the world around us. Continuation of the story, the ripple effect. In the weeks that followed, something unusual happened. The clip of Jasmine's calm exposure and her unexpected compassion didn't just dominate the news. It sparked conversations in living rooms, classrooms, and workplaces across America, the UK, and Canada. Teachers began showing the video in civics classes, asking their students, what matters more, winning an argument, or changing a heart? In Detroit, a group of high schoolers started a campaign called Grace in Action, encouraging their peers to resolve conflicts by listening first, instead of shouting. In Toronto, a single mother posted online, I've been afraid to admit my mistakes at work. But watching Karoline own hers, and seeing Jasmine give her that chance, reminded me that honesty doesn't have to destroy you. It can set you free. Even in London, where debates in Parliament often boiled into insults, a columnist wrote, perhaps the world doesn't need louder voices. Perhaps it needs braver hearts. The ripple effect was undeniable. But the most surprising change came from Karoline herself. She didn't disappear into shame, as many expected. Instead, she began using her platform to advocate for fair treatment of workers, the very issue she had once ignored. She admitted openly that it was Jasmine's compassion that gave her the courage to transform. Months later, the two women were invited to sit side by side at a leadership forum. The topic, leading with truth and grace. Jasmine spoke first, her voice steady and sincere. Leadership isn't about never failing. It's about how we respond when we do. Do we deny? Do we attack? Or do we grow? When it was Karoline's turn, she took a deep breath and said, I was given a chance I didn't deserve. And instead of being destroyed by truth, I was saved by compassion. That is the kind of leadership our world needs more of. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation, not because they had witnessed perfection, but because they had witnessed transformity. Glowing star closing uplift. From a heated debate stage to classrooms and communities across the globe, one moment of courage and kindness changed the narrative. Jasmine Crockett proved that integrity doesn't have to be cruel, and Karoline Leavitt showed that redemption is possible when truth is met with humility. And the message that echoed across borders was simple yet powerful. We rise higher not by tearing each other down, but by lifting each other up. This gives the story its final act, showing how a single live TV moment became a global lesson in kindness and leadership. Continuation. The lasting legacy. Years passed, but people still remembered that night on live television. The clip had become more than just a political moment. It had become a teaching tool, a sermon example, a spark of hope for countless individuals who had lost faith in leadership. Colleges taught it in leadership courses. Community groups played it in conflict resolution workshops. Parents even showed it to their children as proof that strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about choosing kindness when anger seems easier. But perhaps the most touching ripple came from the very people who once felt invisible, the workers whose stories Jasmine had brought to light. One woman, Maria, who had quietly suffered under unfair treatment, stood on a stage years later and said, "When Jasmine Crockett chose compassion instead of cruelty, she didn't just change a debate, she changed my life. Because of that moment, I found the courage to speak my truth. And today, I help others find theirs." The audience erupted in applause, not for politicians, but for everyday people finding strength in truth. And Jasmine, she remained steady. She never boasted about that night, never turned it into a weapon against Karoline. Instead, she used it as an example of what was possible when humanity came before politics. As for Karoline, her journey of redemption wasn't perfect, no one's ever is. But because she had been given grace when she least deserved it, she carried that same grace into how she treated others. Even her fiercest critics admitted, she was no longer the same person she had been on that debate stage. One evening, during a town hall, a young man stood and asked her, "Do you regret what happened that night?" Karoline paused, her voice quiet but firm. "No, because sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that saves you. And that night saved me." The crowd grew silent, then clapped, not out of partisanship, but out of respect for vulnerability. Glowing Star Final Reflection. The story of Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt is not just about politics. It's about what happens when truth is spoken with courage, and compassion is offered with humility. It's about remembering that redemption is never out of reach, that kindness is never wasted, and that one moment of grace can echo far beyond a single stage. And so, long after the lights of that debate faded, the lesson remained, in classrooms, in communities, in families, and in the hearts of people across America, the UK, Canada, and beyond. Real leadership isn't about winning at all costs. It's about reminding us that no matter how divided we are, humanity has the power to bring us back together. One that's the complete arc. From scandal, to compassion, to ripple effect, to lasting legacy, a full 10 to 12-minute inspirational narration.